I want to welcome all veterans, dignitaries, families, and guests to today's Memorial Day celebration. It is my honor and privilege to be here today as the Chief of Police for the City of Richfield. I'm honored today to talk about one of our own officers and a veteran who was killed in the line of duty on June 4th, 1949. Patrolman Fred Babcock Jr. was just 29 years old and was described as a handsome, neat, and boyish young man. The talk at the time was you would never thought Fred had seen 3 years of bloody action with the Marines in the Pacific because of his striking good looks. Fred had been on the Richfield force for only a little more than a year, but was already an alert, well-trained officer known for his photographic memory. Every day he memorized by just a glance the hot sheets of cars stolen in Minneapolis, and won approval for his work in tracing several which have been disposed of in Richfield. I would like to take you back to that June 4th day of 1949. The village, as it was known, was different, with approximately 7,000 residents and a lot of farm fields. Officer Babcock and his partner, Leroy Poulter, were on patrol at approximately 2:15 in the morning when the radio emitted a squawk and the dispatcher's voice came through, calling Poulter and Babcock. An alarm from Eugene Reynolds at 7620 Garfield. Reynolds says two men are prowling around the back door of the National Tea Store, which was at Lyndale and 75th Street. He says he can see them from his back window. Also in front of the place is a new, light-colored Kaiser sedan that doesn't belong to anyone living nearby. There's a man waiting in it. Both Babcock and Poulter had a sense of heightened excitement and danger that officers, even back then, would have had when responding to calls of this nature. The message repeated itself. Officer Babcock looked at Officer Poulter. Officer Babcock then did a U-turn at 68th and Lyndale and responded to the National Tea Store. That location today is where Main Street Village is now located. When they arrived in the area, Officer Babcock dropped Officer Poulter to cover the side door of the store. After finding the suspicious vehicle empty, Officer Babcock headed to the front end of the National Tea Grocery Store. Simultaneously, Officer Poulter spotted a figure running east from the side door toward Garfield Avenue and heard Officer Babcock shout, "Get out of the car!" Then he heard the gunshot. Moments later, according to the report, Officer Poulter heard Officer Babcock repeat his command, which was followed by then another gunshot. Officer Poulter ran to the front of the building and fired 6 shots at a tan car as it sped away. Officer Poulter did that to mark the vehicle as what they used to do back then if the vehicle got away. According to his report, I could not see nor hear my partner until I moved around the front of the squad car and found him lying flat on his back in the street alongside the squad car. Officer Poulter radioed for medical help and attempted to stop the bleeding, but despite his efforts, Officer Fred Babcock Jr. died where he had fallen. A national magazine, The Front Page Detective, titled the death of Officer Babcock, 100 Hours of Hell. While one of the suspects, Gustav Johnson, was picked up at 87th Street and Lyndale Avenue after a lengthy search, the other 3 in the quartet, Alan Hartman, Arthur and Kyle Bistrom, escaped. These individuals went on a crime spree that involved several different states, and they committed numerous crimes which included kidnapping of a policeman, a 16-year-old boy, a 73-year-old businessman, a man and his wife, and another man. All the perpetrators were eventually captured and taken into custody. In the end, first-degree murder indictments were returned on all 4 men, including kidnapping charges under then the Charles Lindbergh Law. Officer Babcock was survived by his wife and 2 small children in the village of Richfield and its residents who mourned his loss. The outpouring of support from the village was unprecedented, raising money for his wife and children who had lost their father and also a husband. Officer Babcock will always be remembered by our police department as an individual who gave the ultimate sacrifice for this community and for his police department. He's remembered by a portrait that is hanging in the front lobby of the police department, the VFW named in his honor, and a conference room in the new municipal center also named in his honor. However, as a police officer, he will always be remembered in our department and in our hearts. I had the opportunity to attend the National Law Enforcement Memorial in 2011 for National Police Week. It is an awesome sight and an unbelievable feeling to have participated in it. However, among the many engraved panels, and there's tens of thousands, I was looking for one name, and that name was Fred Babcock Jr. Through me searching through the endless hours of information to find his name, I was able to locate panel 54 West, line 11, where Fred Babcock Jr.'s name was engraved. I completed a pencil scratching of his name and put it in a frame where it now prominently is displayed in my office. Officer Babcock's name will live forever at the National Law Enforcement Memorial and will also live here in our memorial and within our police department. As we acknowledge all military veterans today and pray for our public safety personnel, I would like to end with an engraved inscription from the National Law Enforcement Memorial. This inscription is very dear to us in the military and into law enforcement and public safety in general. Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, "Blessed are the peacekeepers, for they will be called the children of God." It's important for our community and its officers to know the past of our department. We recently brought our next speaker, Floyd Roman, to our department to tell the story of the Babcock shooting and for our officers to meet what I feel is a legend of our department. When the new municipal center was built, we placed department photos from the 1940s and 1950s in our training room to show our history. The pictures are black and white and feature Floyd and numerous other officers of that era. Some of our officers probably have never seen what a black and white photo looks like. For our officers to meet the actual officer who was in those photos, to me is priceless. He shared his history of the department and these new officers who are just starting to serve our community. Our officers now have a vision to the past and have an appreciation for our community and for the department history that he presented to us. Floyd was born in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and attended Minneapolis schools, graduating from Roosevelt High School. He served 3 years in the United States Navy until his honorable discharge on October 25, 1945. He married his wife Artis while in the service and were together for 49 years until her death in 1994. He has 2 children, Robert and Peggy. Floyd served over 41 years in law enforcement, which is an astonishing amount of years to serve. Floyd served on the Richfield Police Department from 1947 until 1968. He served as a patrolman, sergeant, and captain. He received numerous commendations and certificates from the Chief of Police, the Mayor of Minneapolis, and numerous civic organizations. In 1968, Floyd left the Richfield Police Department to join the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. There he held positions as the Assistant Director of Training and the Assistant Superintendent of the BCA. He was responsible in developing new traffic training programs, planning and directing, and budgeting. While at the BCA, Floyd received numerous commendations and certificates from Governor Al Quie, Hennepin County Chiefs of Police Association, and was inducted into the Minnesota Association of Training Officers Hall of Fame for his contributions to training and education of law enforcement personnel in Minnesota. Floyd retired in 1988 from the BCA. Floyd's distinguished career makes him a legend to all of us at the police department and the community. Without further ado, I am honored and privileged to introduce Floyd Roman.
Well, thanks a lot, Chief. That was quite an introduction. I almost started to look around and see who that guy was, but and I see these officers standing over here, and I feel I should be standing there even at my age of 92. when the nice things that were said about Fred were spoken, I had special feelings, and I have special feelings about being able to stand up here and talk about him. Because Fred and I, and his wife and my wife, were more than, or Fred and I more than just police officers. We were socially friends too. We went to movies together and so on and so forth. And it was a very dreadful job to go over to Lorraine's house, Fred's house, at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning, wake her up and tell her that her husband had been killed. I will never forget that moment. I want to say a few things about Fred, obviously. You heard about his past, a little bit ironic in a sense, because here he served all those years in the Marines and part of it in the South Pacific. He comes back to Richfield unharmed, and after a year in the police department, he is shot and killed by these gangsters that the chief talked about. Fred was, well, there's another little bit of irony with that too. Fred was supposed to be off that night. It was his normal night off, but another officer asked him if he would change shifts so that this other officer could attend some important event to him, which Fred did do, and of course lost his life partially because of that reason. But at any rate, what kind of a person was Fred? Well, he was a quiet type, pretty businesslike, nothing laughing, to a minor degree, but not great big loud laughs or anything like that. But despite being that way, he was very friendly. The officers liked him and enjoyed working with him. He was a dedicated person. He believed in what he was doing and helping the then village of Richfield and the people that lived here. He was very dependable. That's why most of us enjoyed working with him. Not like one other officer I worked with. Every time we'd find an open door behind a business place, this other officer would always say to me, "You go first, Floyd, I'll be right behind you." And I often wondered how far behind me. But Fred was there, right beside you, or maybe even ahead of you sometimes. Fred also was very good at controlling his emotions. Police work involves a lot of emotions, not only on the officers themselves, but the people they deal with and the incidents that they're involved in. And it's sometimes hard to not do something against what you should be doing when you face all these emotions. Let me give you one example. He and I received a call to a disturbance, and I can't remember all the details, but I do remember this one fella coming up and giving us a real bad time, swearing at us, just obnoxious. And as he stood in front of Fred, he went and spit on Fred's uniform. These officers would know how they feel about that. And as the phlegm was dripping off Fred's badge, I stood there and wondering what's going to happen. But Fred knew what most officers should know, that it's not the job of the police to punish. That belongs to another segment of government, the judicial section. Now, if Fred wanted to mention that in court later on, that he also spit on me, maybe the judge then could add something to it, but it's not the job of the police. Their job is to enforce the law, and that's it. Well, Fred just went about his duty, didn't say anything, although I looked in his face and boy, he was mad, I'll tell you. And I was too. this is an insult because not just the spitting on the uniform, but on the badge. That badge represents the community. And he's spitting on the people of Richfield, really. But, as I say, he handled the situation real well. Didn't say anything, wrote out the reports, and we made the arrest, and that was about it. A couple of thoughts I'd like to leave you with. You know, when Fred enlisted in the Marines, in a sense, he was willing to give his life for his country. When he became a police officer, the same thing. He was willing to give his life for his community, and he did. Fred died in the service of his community, the people of Richfield. Fred, I don't know if you can hear me today, but I say thank God for people like you.